Let's get right into it. Today we're unpacking the history of a guy who absolutely upended medieval geopolitics and, frankly, changed the course of the world as we know it. I'm talking about Berke Khan. As the grandson of the legendary Genghis Khan, he wasn't just another military commander stomping around the massive footprint of the Mongol Empire. No, he was a pivotal leader who took the traditional Mongol sword and swung it in a totally unexpected direction. We're going to explore exactly how he went from being a traditional nomadic warrior to the fierce protector of the very civilization his own family was actively trying to conquer and dismantle.
Okay, let's dive into this because this is easily one of the most fascinating paradoxes in all of recorded history. How on earth did a grandson of Genghis Khan end up forging an alliance with Egypt to fight against his own flesh and blood? It's just a massive ideological clash. On one hand, you've got his undeniable Mongol bloodline, a lineage built completely on relentless, unified expansion and fierce, unquestioning loyalty to the family unit. But then, on the other hand, you have his deeply held religious convictions pulling him in the exact opposite direction. This monumental clash between blood and faith, that is the beating heart of Berke Khan's story, and it literally fractured the greatest contiguous land empire the world had ever seen. To see how this all unfolded, we'll trace his life chronologically. We'll start with his early life, look at his monumental conversion to Islam, his time leading the Golden Horde, the devastating war with his cousin Hulagu Khan, and finally, wrap up with his lasting legacy and impact.
All right, Section 1, Early Life, Growing Up in an Expanding Empire. So, tracing his origins, Berke was born out on the harsh, unforgiving Mongolian steppes somewhere between 1207 and 1209. He was the official son of Jochi Khan, who was Genghis Khan's eldest son. Now, historically, there was a profound amount of friction between Genghis and Jochi regarding Jochi's actual parentage. But even with all that political background noise, Berke was raised firmly within the traditional, ruthless Mongol warrior culture. In this society, survival and conquest were practically the exact same thing. His childhood was completely defined by the rapid, massive expansion of the Mongol Empire across Asia and into Europe. He grew up mastering the composite bow, horseback riding, and the brutal arts of nomadic warfare. By the time of the Khwarezm campaign between 1219 and 21, he was coming of age right there in the military camps. He eventually joined those devastating Western campaigns alongside his prominent brother, Batu Khan, actively taking part in the subjugation of the Russian principalities and Eastern Europe.
Moving on to Section 2, Conversion to Islam, the ideological pivot. And this is where the trajectory of the Mongol Empire permanently shifts. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer cultural leap Berke Khan took. It is absolutely fascinating. Around the year 1250, he became the very first Mongol ruler of his stature to embrace Islam. He moved entirely away from traditional Tengrism, the ancestral faith of his family, which centered on the worship of the eternal blue sky and earth spirits. Instead, he adopted the Islamic faith. Historical sources tell us that through contact with wandering Sufi mystics and Muslim merchants trading in the caravan cities of Central Asia, Berke was deeply drawn to the religion, so he made the incredibly difficult, highly unorthodox decision to convert. And this wasn't just a quiet, personal choice. It was a profound geopolitical pivot that laid the essential foundation for Islam to spread throughout his vast, newly acquired territories. Section 3, Golden Horde Leadership, Uniting the Blue and White Hordes. Let's just take a second to look at the sheer scale of his power. After the death of his heavily influential brother, Batu Khan, around 1255 or 1256, and following the super brief, unstable reigns of Sartok and Ulashki, Berke Khan rose to absolute power in 1257. He officially became the Khan of the Golden Horde. This was the massive northwestern sector of the Mongol Empire, an unimaginably huge expanse of land. Ruling from his extraordinarily wealthy capital of Sarai, right near the modern-day Volga River, he firmly controlled and unified a territory that encompassed modern Russia, parts of Eastern Europe, and the Caucasus region. He successfully brought together the Western Blue Horde and the Eastern White Horde, creating this highly centralized, immensely powerful state that commanded the critical trade routes bridging east and west. But Berke didn't just conquer, he governed. And he did it by seamlessly merging traditional Mongol military administration with established Islamic governance. A perfect example of this hybrid leadership is how he implemented the jizya. By applying this traditional Islamic tax on his non-Muslim subjects, like the Russian Orthodox principalities, he effectively integrated Islamic legal and economic practices right into the fabric of a nomadic Mongol state. It was an incredibly pragmatic move. It let him run a highly efficient administration, fund his massive military machine, and keep order over a wildly diverse population without forcing mass religious conversion. Section 4. War with Hulagu Khan, the climax of the Mongol Civil War. We are now reaching a point of unprecedented rupture in Mongol unity. The year is 1258, and it acts as the ultimate geopolitical catalyst for everything that follows. Berke's own cousin, Hulagu Khan, marches his fearsome army right onto Baghdad. He completely sacks the city and actually executes the opposite caliph. The story goes they rolled him in a carpet and had horses trample him, which was a traditional Mongol execution style to avoid spilling royal blood on the earth. But look, this wasn't just another military victory for Hulagu, it was the absolute catastrophic devastation of the cultural, intellectual, and political center of the Islamic world. The famed House of Wisdom was destroyed, and legend says the Tigris River literally ran black with the ink of scholars' books and red with the blood of the city's inhabitants. For Berke, who had wholeheartedly embraced Islam, this apocalyptic destruction brought by his own blood relative was an intolerable crossing of the line. The tension explodes with his documented reaction. Berke Khan famously stated, "He has sacked all the cities of the Muslims." This is the exact moment his religious convictions clashed irreversibly with his familial ties. In traditional Mongol culture, turning your weapons against a fellow descendant of Genghis Khan was a massive taboo that threatened the very fabric of their world order. Yet Berke simply could not stand by while the relentless engine of his ancestors' empire destroyed his chosen faith. He demanded justice for the blood of the caliph. And this builds into one of history's most fascinating and complex geopolitical maneuvers. To stop his cousin's unstoppable advance into the Middle East, Berke Khan reaches out across the known world and forms a strategic alliance with the Mamluk sultans of Egypt, led by the legendary commander Baybars. It is a stunning alignment. You have the ruler of the Russian steppes coordinating with the rulers of the Nile. In 1262, these combined pressures culminated in open war. Berke's forces clashed violently with Hulagu's army by the Caucasus Mountains and the Caspian Sea. Berke had officially teamed up with a foreign power to halt his own cousin, prioritizing the survival of the Islamic world over the expansion of the Mongol Empire. The sheer scale and consequence of his military maneuvering here cannot be overstated. This alliance successfully halted Hulagu's expansion into North Africa and permanently strengthened the Egyptian Mamluks. More importantly, it marked the very first major internal Mongol war. The aura of Mongol invincibility was shattered because they were finally fighting themselves. The empire was splintering from within. While Berke also threw his political weight behind Arik Boke in the wider Toluid civil war, his primary driving focus was always fighting Hulagu. He proved definitively that his loyalty to his faith and his sense of justice superseded his loyalty to the Mongol expansion machine. Which brings us to Section 5, Legacy and Impact. The transformation of an empire. So the crucial point is that Berke Khan was simultaneously a relentless, terrifying conqueror and a visionary religious pioneer. He secured total, unquestioned autonomy for the Golden Horde, fully separating it from the political chaos of the Eastern Empire. And he didn't just fight his cousin in the south, he projected massive power westward too, leading highly successful military campaigns deep into Lithuania, Poland, and Prussia, all while maintaining strict, iron-fisted control over the tributary Russian princes. But perhaps his most profound, lasting historical footprint is that his rule and his defiance sparked the eventual Islamization of 3 of the 4 major Mongol khanates. He laid the cultural groundwork for centuries of Islamic presence in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Berke Khan proved that true, deep-seated conviction can literally change the direction of an entire empire. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to ponder. How would global history look today if the Mongol civil war between Berke and Hulagu had never happened? If Berke hadn't stepped up to protect the Islamic world from his own family, allowing Hulagu's forces to sweep unhindered into Egypt and beyond, the map of medieval civilization and potentially our modern world would be entirely unrecognizable. It's a powerful reminder of the fragile nature of historical alliances and how the ideological pivot of just one leader can echo